Hello there, and welcome to my house. My name is Gabe, and I'm here with my family, and we just watched The Prestige, Christopher Nolan's 2006 movie about a bunch of magicians in the 1800s. Now, before I get all carried away, let's have the rest of my family introduce themselves so you get a little idea of who we're dealing with.
Hi, my name is Missy. I am Gabe's wife.
Whoa.
And that's it. No.
That's it? That's all you are? That's the only personality?
No, I'm not as much of a cinephile as the others on this podcast, but after marrying Gabe and being with him for a while, he's gotten me to reappreciate movies and love talking about them. So I'm excited to give this a go.
And on my left...
My name's Sam. I have opinions, and I have opinions about movies, so I think I'm okay for this podcast.
This sounds like the introduction to like a Real Housewives. You know how they're always like, my name's Rachel, and I love a spicy margarita at 7 p.m. It's very weird.
Because my friends are always spicy. So it's got to have like a sassy ending.
Oh, there's got to be an end cap for sure. Well, let me tell you guys, there's truly no director working today as spicy as Christopher Nolan. You like that transition?
Segue.
You like that?
Segue.
You like that?
I appreciate it.
This is going to be a mini-series on our top 4 Christopher Nolan movies. Not our top 4 favorites by any means, but some of the 4 that we think are the most important of his filmography to cover, at least the first time around. You know, it's very possible that in the future we come back around and we do 4 more of his movies. He's one of those guys that has a pretty rich filmography. I think we could probably do another round with him at some point. But there's a lot to cover, especially with this movie. So let's dive into it. I have my super secret, sneaky starting question to get us started here, guys. And the question is, in 2006, how many films prominently featured magic and magicians? How many films? The answer may surprise you.
I know.
You do know?
Yeah.
Miss, do you have a guess?
How many films in 2006 featured magic of some type?
And magicians.
And magicians.
Yeah.
Okay, did any of the Harry Potter movies come out in 2006?
I don't think so. I can double check that, though.
Because I'm trying to think of movies, period, that feature magic, and I literally can't come up with any besides Harry Potter.
It looks like Harry Potter actually skipped 2006.
So
Damn.
There's one on 2005, one 2007.
So on Harry Potter's off year,
Yeah.
he was on the bench this year.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan was like,
room.
I guess I'll fit in my magic movie in 2006.
Yeah.
All right, so Sam, do you...
I know this.
You do know this.
I know this. This year was very funny because 2006 had twin movies, as you could call it, magic movies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's The Illusionist, starring Edward Norton, and then you had The Prestige with Hugh Jackman, and there's a third movie.
There is a third movie.
Magic Mike.
Yes. Triple XL, double stuffed. No.
Oh snap!
It's
the prequel.
It's Scoop. Directed by Woody Allen.
One of Woody Allen's later movies with Hugh Jackman and Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, they're both in it.
How weird is that?
It's so goofy.
In the same year that a significantly better movie came out with both of them as in magician roles.
Did you guys see Scoop?
I've seen a little bit of Scoop.
I didn't know Scoop existed until I researched this movie, and I was like, oh, it's another Woody Allen movie. He makes them every year.
He is a very prolific filmmaker. I wouldn't say necessarily good.
Yeah.
He had his time, I will say, for sure. And
aren't we mad at Woody Allen?
Yeah, we're not gonna. That's not information to tread here on the Christopher Nolan miniseries.
Okay.
So, no, that's an issue.
What was
for
the
another
other
day.
one? Scoop,
The Prestige, and The Illusionist, which was Edward Norton. I had a pretty good cast from what I remember. Let me double check it, because I remember being kind of surprised when I looked this up as well. From what I can tell, I've been told that the movie is definitely worse.
Yeah.
But Edward Norton, Jessica Biel, Paul Giamatti. Aaron Taylor Johnson sneaks in there.
Wow.
One of his earlier roles. There's a couple British names that are pretty prominent. And it was directed by the guy who ended up doing like Limitless and the first Divergent movies. You remember that?
Limitless, the Bradley Cooper.
The Bradley Cooper film, yeah.
But did he do the show or the movie?
He did do a little bit of the show as well. He hasn't. If that's any indication as to how that guy's career has been going since that movie, that's all you need to know. So, all right. Well, that's enough for The Illusionist. Let's talk about a more interesting movie. Quick trigger warnings before we dive into this one. For people that are seriously affected by suicide portrayed on screen, animal death on screen, and also drowning on screen, this movie may be a little tough for you because there's a good amount of all that in this one. And my wife here is sensitive to animals in particular, and we've seen this movie before, but for some reason we totally forgot about the bird stuff.
Oh yes, yeah.
There's a good amount of like bird crushing.
Yeah, there is a lot
and,
of bird death.
Carcasses and
I was not very happy.
Yeah, I don't
looked
know
at
why.
Gabe and I was like, because Gabe always does this thing for me where he checks doesthedogdie.com and checks if any animals die. And I know I've seen this movie before, but we Gabe and I have a baby, and post baby, my sensitivity to animal or children deaths on screen is very high. So Gabe always checks for me before the movie, but he didn't check for me this time, and I was very upset.
Maybe that's the problem. There was a sensitivity difference. Because we haven't seen this movie for a few years. Sam, did you watch this movie before this?
I watched it very recently, so
you did?
I vividly remember these scenes of the bird.
Oh, okay.
You know, I think honestly, there's like, it's a running theme in my head with the movie, with the bird.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's interesting, but it's
there's definitely some thematic conversation to be had when we get to that point with the birds for sure, and I definitely want to when we get to that, because there's a lot of interesting, rich thematical subtext going on in this movie that I think is really cool.
It is.
But let's get started first and foremost with the simple question to get us started. Sam, we'll start with you. What did you think of The Prestige?
I honestly think it's one of Nolan's best movies. I think it uses his style. You know, like Nolan has a certain editing style, his dialogue, his movies, you know, you can see the development of his movies technically, but in terms of the script and the way he's cutting and everything, you can see the similarities in each movie. And sometimes I think it works, sometimes I think it doesn't work as much. But I think this movie, it works perfectly. And the concept, you know, of this movie, like the main theme of it, which it you know, is rewards you on rewatches, is just, honestly, I hate to use the word brilliant, but like I think in this case, Nolan is doing a lot of brilliant things, and I think he executes it really well.
So you're really high on this one.
I really like this movie.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Well, I'm glad this is the first one we're talking about then. Starting off on a high. Miss, what about you? What do you think?
I mean, I've seen this movie a couple times in the past before. We just rewatched this like a couple days ago, and I've always really liked this movie. I didn't realize until you were talking about this podcast, like Christopher Nolan series of movies, I didn't realize that it was a Nolan movie until you brought it up. And like, it's because to me, you know, you think of movies like, and I know we're gonna probably talk about these movies later on, but you think of movies like Interstellar, Inception, is Nolan, right?
For sure.
Oppenheimer, you know, all these Christopher Nolan movies, but I feel like this is not spoken about a lot as like a Christopher Nolan movie.
Definitely.
So like when you think about some of those patterns in his movies and you think about this movie, you can still see them, but they're much less. His themes feel a little more incognito in this movie, which I actually find interesting. So I feel like originally I just liked this was a very entertaining movie to me, and then kind of adding the layer of looking for the Nolan in it during my last rewatch of it. It kind of gave it a little extra spice. Speaking of spicy drinks, like yeah. But I think it kind of gave it a little bit of an extra layer that made it even more interesting to watch than just entertaining. So I also give this movie pretty high marks. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Nolan movie, but I really do enjoy it a lot.
Nice.
Yes.
So I should mention before we continue, because I'm sure that just caught on on Mike. This podcast is literally in our living room, and the intention of this podcast, before we get more into the movie itself, I do want to mention that this is going to be a pretty unfiltered podcast, because we just want to make you feel like you're sitting in our living room with us after we've just watched this movie, and we're talking it through together in sort of a more around the fireplace family kind of way. And, sometimes that includes maybe a dog barking, maybe a cat meowing, because we do have both of those.
Me burping.
Some burps here and there. Someone goes to get some tea or goes to the bathroom or something.
Yeah.
It's all kind of a part of the scheme.
Or a baby monitor.
Or in this case, the baby monitor making some sputtering noises here and there. In this particular case, yes, the baby's sleeping, so the monitor is close by, so you might hear a little bit of that too. But that's all part of the environment that we're trying to set for this pod. As for me, with this movie, I really like what both of you guys are saying, because I think it's going to dovetail really nicely into the origin story / background when we get into that next. But for me, I have a weird take with movies in general, where I think that I always feel weird about marking a movie higher on a rewatch, because I think that movies should be effective the same way every time you watch it.
I see.
And I do think that with some movies it works in the favor of the movie watching it multiple times. This movie in particular, I think, is an example of that. And there are some that get diluted a little bit more after you've watched it multiple times. Excuse me. So, in general, my kind of rule of thumb about it is I want the movie to speak to me the first time and give me what I need on the first go. And I know that that's not a very common practice for filmmakers and things like that. There's too much... there's too much involved for people to be like, you just watch it once and that's all you need to do. But that's kind of how it is for me, at least on a critical level. But that being said, like I sort of alluded to before, rewatching this movie was a really fun experience. And I'm glad that I did it for this particular reason of coming together and talking about it after we've seen it.
Yeah.
Because I think if I just casually rewatched it, I just wouldn't want to casually rewatch it. I'd want to watch it after I've seen it one time for a purpose like this. And because that's what I did, I think I liked it a lot more. I still think it's around like a 4 out of 5 on the Letterboxd kind of thing. But I agree with you, Sam. I do think that it is one of his best movies. And I'm excited as we get further into the series to kind of get more in detail about what our kind of rankings kind of look like.
Yeah.
Because I do think that that'll be a fun conversation, especially when we get towards the end. Towards the end of the miniseries. But let's, once again, dive a little bit deeper into the Prestige. I've got a little bit of background information, you guys, to go over.
Give it to us.
So we'll get started with, the real inception of it all, no pun intended. Maybe pun intended after all. I don't know, after that reaction, how can I?
You got me.
So Nolan's executive producer brings him the book, The Prestige, from 1995. This book was pretty well acclaimed in the time. It had some pretty key differences that made it quite different from the movie that we saw. The main ones being the story is structured around the journals of the two magicians, similar to how we see in the movie in the narrations, and also seeing them physically using the books. But there's also a story that kind of plays as the backbone, the spine of the whole book, which is a story between each of their grandchildren meeting each other. Their great-grandchildren, I'm sorry. Another important detail is Angier's wife isn't killed by Borden like she is in this movie. Instead, she's pregnant in the book and loses the baby when Borden inadvertently throws the wife to the ground. So the sort of background on where their rivalry gets like really intense is completely different in the book. There's a loss of a child as opposed to a loss of
Just a wife.
of the wife herself. Yeah. And also in general, because of the great grandchildren plot line, the ending is different and somehow even more complicated than the movies is. If you want to read it, there's a very straightforward but still equally confusing description of it on Wikipedia. So we're not going to get into details on it here; it would just take too long. So I'm not even going to bother with all that shit. But that being said, it's really interesting to imagine a completely faithful version of this movie with those differences in mind. Because Nolan is very candid in interviews about this movie, saying that it took him and his brother Jonathan a long time to figure out how to adapt this movie. And I could totally see why. Because it is, the journals and these great-grandchildren in the modern time, which is kind of like,
yeah,
who really cares about these characters, But I'm curious, Miss, do you think that the movie would have benefited from being more faithful to the book, or do you think that the changes that were made were appropriate?
I mean, I do think it's structured around the journals. The narration entirely is out of the two journals, because Borden is in jail reading Angier's journal. Angier? Is that Angier?
Angier.
Angier?
Yeah, they always say Angier. I don't know if it's an accent thing, but I don't know, everyone's got an accent in this movie.
But, so Borden is in jail reading Angier's journal.
Yeah.
And Angier.
we could also I guess we could also say Hugh Jackman or Christian Bale
is reading Christian Bale's journal at some point a little earlier in the story.
Yeah. When he's on the sort of trek towards Tesla. Yeah.
So I think that the journals are what's structuring it. I am glad that it's not based off of the great-grandchildren, because I think the journals and the great-grandchildren would have two different viewpoints, right? Because what's kind of fun about the journals is that the two characters trick each other through their journal writing.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. Like, at the end of both of their journals, they're like, actually,
I see you
you're
reading
this
exactly. Christian.
Yes.
Which is so goofy, but it's also really funny.
It's effective when you're watching it.
Yeah.
But I think if we had, like, a kind of word-of-mouth storytelling version of it, it wouldn't be as effective. Because the whole thing about this movie is these two men tricking each other.
Back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah. So I think using the journals, it kind of plays with the theme of the movie a little bit better. I think a book that's got a bunch of pages and a bunch more padding that it can afford, I think you can add like a great-grandchild viewpoint. But I think for the movie, it would have made the movie too long. And
unnecessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with everything you said. I believe a book can deal with more multiple viewpoints and also just more like non-linearity. Because from what I researched about the book, is that the ending is also extremely grim. It's like the end of the movie is also, I would say, grim,
absolutely.
But there's like a touch of like Nolan, like I don't know, like hopefulness and at the end.
Well, because you get Bale going right back to his daughter.
Yeah, like Borden's or Borden or
Borden or
Fallon.
Yeah.
Hey, can we spoil the movie?
Wait, we're spoiling the movie.
Oh
right?
gosh, yeah, I probably should have done this before, but yeah, this. I mean,
Spoiler.
if you're listening to a podcast about The Prestige, just watch the movie. It's one movie.
You can just put in like the description, like spoilers.
Yeah, it's not like we're vaguely referencing like 16 movies for a ranking or something.
Yeah.
We're talking about one movie. If you haven't seen this movie, why are you listening to the podcast?
Exactly.
You'd be a maniac if you're listening to this and you're like, I haven't seen this movie, but let's hear what they have to say. I don't know. I'm sure there are people out there that do that, and all power to you. I just think you get so much more out of a conversation when you know what the hell they're talking about. Yeah, you gotta know the events of the film. Yeah. And for our particular purposes, I think it is very useful to watch the film, especially for a miniseries on Christopher Nolan, who is arguably one of the most confusing directors to just talk about. Like, his movies are conceptually really bizarre and specific and intricate, and he's so idiosyncratic in that way that when you're trying to just, like, talk to someone about, like, you know, what happens in The Prestige, or, like, you know, later in our miniseries we'll talk about Interstellar, like, what happens in Interstellar?
Yeah,
like, oh Jesus.
Yeah.
So the world was created in Big Bang, like, where do you even begin with that? So, you know, with this one at least it's a little bit easier, because I agree with what you were saying before, Miss, about this movie came at an earlier time in Nolan's career. Excuse me, I got a burp coming. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So this came in 2006, this movie, which is after Insomnia, after Memento, after even Batman Begins, but the book was brought to Nolan before Batman Begins was shot. But because of the complicated amount of time it took to figure out how the script was going to look from the two Nolan brothers, they ended up just doing Batman Begins first instead. So that came out in 2005, and by that point, the two Nolans kind of figured out what this movie was going to be. So then that year, they start filming Prestige, and then it comes out in 2006. So it comes at an earlier time in his career where, you know, he has his ideas and his interests, and they do peek through a good amount in this movie, but it's not as prevalent as even a little bit after this when you get into, you know, the Inceptions in 2010 or even Dunkirk to a certain extent. I think works kind of similarly to this movie in the way that it goes back and forth between a bunch of time periods in the same story. But that's another podcast for a different day. So in terms of the casting of this movie, it's kind of a fun little, like, building blocks. So Hugh Jackman was casted first. And when Nolan talked about this, he said he appreciated Jackman's, quote, understanding of the interaction between a performer and a live audience, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because he is a Broadway actor. Very much. Wouldn't you agree, Miss? Very, very Broadway, right?
I think his ex-wife
would beg to say. Well,
beg to differ,
can argue that he's an actor.
The greatest showman. He's the greatest showman.
He is certainly a showman.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a little bit of a Broadway snob, so you saying Hugh Jackman is a Broadway actor, I'm like, that's a whole podcast. That's a whole podcast to discuss.
That's when the LilliHouse podcast network kicks off. Missy will have her separate Broadway show where she just riffs on how not actually that good Hugh Jackman is.
I mean, I think he's great on screen.
Every episode.
I think he's great on screen. Every episode is
Part
about
one of my
Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, you're trying to talk about
Part 1 out of 3,000 of
somehow,
my Hugh Jackman series.
Somehow keep going back to the music.
Part
like,
1,
how did we
Les
get
Mis
here?
sucked.
Oh boy. Well,
I'm joking.
Literally an entire podcast.
So after that, as I mentioned, Batman Begins is before this, and Christian Bale worked with Nolan on that movie, obviously. And Christian Bale actually called Christopher Nolan after he got his hands on the Prestige script and asked him to play Borden.
Wow.
That was his choice.
Okay.
To play that character. Do you guys think that he made the right choice? Like, instead of being like, yeah, I want to play the Hugh Jackman role, you know, like I want to play Angiers. Do you think he chose the right one of the two?
I mean, yes, of course. This character, Angier, is like, he is the showman. Like, that is like his main character trait, is that he loves, as he says at the end of the movie, like, the look on their faces. He wants the look on on these audiences' faces to be amazed.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously Christian Bale's characters, you know, are more focused on the trick and the purity of a trick and
the technique
and kind of the cutting edge of it all. So I think it's perfect because those are what those actors are. Like we just discussed with Hugh Jackman, he does so many plays. He is a showman. He loves the audience. You know, look even with Wolverine, he's still playing Wolverine, and I think he knows because the audience loves him. You know, and he's still doing that. Even though he's said multiple times he's done playing Wolverine, he gets roped back in because I think he truly just loves doing that character. And Christian Bale is just he's very actor's actor. He's so honed in on every performance, even in movies that are not as great, you know, as some of his really great films. He's always doing his best in the performances, and you can never take that away from Christian Bale.
Yeah, and I think we're going to crystallize that further with one of our games later on as well.
Okay.
To get more in detail with what you're talking about. You agree with that assessment?
Yeah.
Yeah. So after that, in a similar way to Christian Bale, Michael Caine, who played Alfred in the Batman movies, obviously gets brought on in a sort of similar kind of role, this kind of mentor-y figure to the two main, I guess I don't know if you'd call them protagonists because I feel like it's kind of mixed up for most of the movie between protagonist and antagonist. But Scarlett Johansson after that also joins into the main pair as well. Caine obviously goes on to be a big part of the Nolan universe of movies, shows up in a whole bunch of them. We'll certainly talk about his performances more in this series. Scarlett Johansson though.
Michael Caine plays the same role in all of Christopher Nolan's movies.
He basically does, which I think speaks to what Nolan thinks of Caine himself as like an actor and as a figure in movies.
As a mentor. As
a kind of like a poster child of a certain time in movie making, and now is at an age where he can kind of spread his wealth in a way to some of the younger guys, and I think that's just perfect use for him personally. Scarlett Johansson, on the other hand, this is it. This is pretty much it. She has Vicky Cristina Barcelona in 2008, which feels like a real kind of like elevation for her in a lot of ways. And then Iron Man 2 in 2010, and then the rest is
history.
The rest is obviously history from there for a whole bunch of reasons. A few other fun little hints and things. This kind of goes into our more trivia corner section, going from our sort of like origin story kind of explanation of the background of the movie, going into a little bit more trivia. For the Nikola Tesla role, Nolan said that he wanted a huge charismatic personality but not a movie star. So David Bowie was Nolan's one and only choice for that role, for that reason, and luckily David Bowie agreed to it. Get this, within a few minutes of them meeting for it.
Wow.
The story goes that Nolan flew to New York to meet with Bowie, and within a few minutes of them hanging out and talking to each other when they met in New York City, Bowie agreed to do it, which I think is great. Because I think Bowie's really good in this.
I think he's great, and I don't even find that surprising. I think they both have, similar creative minds in a way. They both are visual, creatures in a way.
Bowie, absolutely.
Bowie, obviously, you were listening to his music. That's how his legacy will live on. But, what he's doing visually, the worlds he's creating with his music and the looks, all the famous looks he's had. It's just as important as the music you're listening to. And I think Nolan is trying to do the same thing. He's trying to create the same effect that Bowie does. But I love Bowie. You could tell him. I'm a very huge Bowie fan.
Well, it's great insight because I think the Tesla character in this movie could have gone in a really hokey direction. You have that accent, you have the kind of weird look with the dueling eye colors. He's obviously an eccentric figure in the movie, a little more aloof. So I think having Bowie to kind of elevate that makes the character way more interesting to watch. Because you imagine some kind of random character actor coming in and just really going for it, it would have thrown the whole movie off. You know?
I mean, literally like 2 minutes before we started recording, they told me that David Bowie played Tesla, and I was like, David Bowie? Like David Bowie? Like I thought there must be another David Bowie. Like I would never have guessed that was David Bowie. Because when I think, kind of like what Sam was saying, like, when I think of David Bowie, I think of, like, his iconic looks and his big kind of almost, like, flamboyant...
In his prime, for sure.
...personality.
Yeah.
And, like, Tesla, like, had his hands behind his back and was very kind of one face, very, very short sentenced, like, very kind of still, like, which I guess was probably kind of fun for Bowie to play, because he got to really, like, experiment with something totally different than he's used to. But is this Bowie's first acting gig, or had he done other things?
Oh, no, miss. Don't you know Labyrinth?
Labyrinth. I forgot about Labyrinth.
Can't forget about Labyrinth.
And Labyrinth was way before this.
Labyrinth was 80.
Yeah.
7?
Okay, I totally forgot about Labyrinth. And I do love that movie.
That's massive.
He's amazing. But he's like the total opposite that he is in this movie. He's like that very David Bowie-esque character.
Yeah, and that was definitely him at that time too.
Yeah.
In his kind of peak fame, really personifying what his brand is, like you were saying, Sam. So then it makes a lot of sense. You know, at this time, 2006, he's definitely over the curve.
Yeah.
Still relevant for sure.
He was alive in 2006.
But for guys like Nolan, I'm sure, you know, was a very important figure for him.
Yeah,
for Nolan growing up, I think, you know, he was at the perfect age to really appreciate Bowie at the time where he was, you know, he was really hitting.
Huge,
yeah.
I just have a hard time, like, of all the people to play a minor character, I mean an important character in the movie, but a minor character who, again, doesn't say a lot, doesn't do a lot in general. I mean, he builds the machine of the film, but it's not like he himself. It's Gollum, what's his name?
Andy Serkis.
It's Andy Serkis, who actually has more of like an impact and
Mr.
more communication.
Alley. Well, that actually is interesting, because I read a fan theory about this film.
Really? Do tell.
Semi-popular on Reddit.
oh boy, here we go.
So yeah, it's gonna be really
stupid.
Here we go.
Is that the real Tesla is Andy Serkis's character, and then Tesla, or David Bowie's character, is like a front.
Oh.
And
that's interesting.
From what I read, the reason for this is that Borden kind of sends Angier after Tesla, with the passcode or whatever, and he's like, that's the key or whatever, But Borden doesn't know. Does he know about the cloning machine? Does he know about that? So then, like, why would he send... He probably thought Tesla was a red herring, but because Mr. Alley, Andy Serkis, is the real Tesla, and he's also throwing off Edison's men, because Edison's men are on.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's the way to kind of be incognito and be like, the real guy making these machines is in the background. He's the assistant.
Right.
But
who you think is Igor, but is actually the Dr. Frankenstein.
Could also be another reason why he doesn't say much.
Yeah, like...
Because he doesn't actually know much.
Yeah, it's an interesting theory that I don't think Nolan ever doesn't know. I don't think he knows about it. I'd be curious to his perspective on that theory. But...
He's going to be like, oh, where'd you get that from? And he'll be like, there's a bunch of Redditors like, interview over.
That is a question. I'm sure we'll get to it later.
Yeah.
But like Sam's question about does Borden know about the cloning machine? That was like the one question. I mean, that question isn't the exact question I came prepared with, but it has to do with it. So I don't know if we're gonna like have a section for that later or not.
We can do a Q&A-ish picking nits kind of section. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Then I'll save it for later.
For sure. A few other quick little trivia things. There's a man named Ricky Jay in this movie who plays the older magician earlier on that the two of them kind of work under at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
He is an actual famous magician who had a really prominent act in like the 50s, 60s, 70s.
Cool.
He was a big deal in like Las Vegas when that was a big deal, all that fun stuff. After the 70s, when things started to slow down a little bit for magic as like a live show, he transitions into acting into movies. And he he shows up in a few very interesting ones, including this movie, obviously, Boogie Nights,
Wow.
Tomorrow Never Dies, the James Bond movie,
yeah.
and another PTA movie, Magnolia, which is very interesting.
Who was he in? Do you know specifically?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check his IMDb, but obviously becomes a good friend of PTA's.
Yeah, PTA must have liked his magic acts. Or something.
He ends up in a whole bunch more, but I thought that those 3 other movies were really funny examples of like this guy transitioning into an acting career.
Yeah, that's insane. He picked like really.
Yeah, because he also did a lot of quote magic consulting. So he does a little bit of magic consulting for this movie. He also did magic consulting for The Enemy, The Illusionist. He taught Edward Norton sleight of hand.
That's crazy.
For that movie, which I think is hilarious.
So he's connected to both of these twin movies.
Yeah,
Interesting.
It was a busy year in 2006 for our man Ricky Jay.
This is probably the best year of his life, honestly. He's
the best paycheck.
Look at all this magic I worked on. Like I worked on this magic. I'm in these movies. Like I'm in this movie. I'm like this is my time to
Incredible.
shine. You know,
Double.
Probably got way more than he did doing magic too.
Oh, sure.
Well, I don't know because if this movie is any indication of how much money you can get for doing magic, both Borden and Angier were just like filthy rich by the end of this.
Yeah, that's a weird part of this movie where like they go from being absolutely dirt poor broke to filthy disgusting rich, seemingly within days. Which I think is pretty funny.
And it's not like them being poor is a focus of the film.
Yeah.
But them when they get rich, I mean, you see it in their house.
Whatever.
You see it in in the fact that Hugh Jackman can stay at this nice hotel for like indefinitely, literally his word.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Borden's house is gorgeous and beautiful, and they have help and all of that. So, but I feel like there's so much on like Borden yelling that they can't afford a doctor, they can't afford this and that at the beginning, but then at the end, their wealth is like so minuscule.
So when you think about it though, that makes so much sense because when you think about what these main characters prioritize throughout the movie.
That's true.
It makes so much sense that earlier on, when they don't have the money, that is an important focus of the movie.
Yeah.
But when they have it, they're way more concerned about fighting each other and like getting over each other and
the secrets.
Yeah, and improving their act, and the act becomes more important than the stuff at home.
Yeah, that's
so the
true.
money that they have becomes secondary. Even their relationships become secondary to their pursuit of being the best acts. So I'm glad you brought that up though, because I think that's a really smart choice definitely. In the movie. There was only one set that was actually built for the movie. Which was the area under the stage of the theater, like where Hugh Jackman falls down in the transporting man where he falls down the little chute. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, into the water thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like that whole area. They use that as sort of the throughout the movie. They use that as the place where everybody falls into, basically. Got it. The little trapdoors. Otherwise, they just dressed up a whole bunch of areas in Los Angeles and sound stages for the movie, which I think is pretty cool.
In sound stages?
Yeah, so they didn't build anything on these stages. They just used them for certain shots and moments.
Got it.
So that's pretty cool. Shows a little bit of like the economical side of Nolan at this point, which I'll get into now as well. Nolan primarily wanted to use handheld camera setups and use as much natural light as possible. So like instead of using a whole bunch of like big lights to pretend to be the sun and all this other stuff, they tried to use as much like natural light as possible.
That's awesome.
So lights coming through from the natural sun or the moon or things like that, which is incredibly cool.
It's great how Nolan, even at this kind of lower budget, can really like technically just do such interesting things. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean he's so creative with the form in so many ways, and I think that's what makes him such a fun director to watch and talk about. And we'll definitely get into that more with his other movies too. But I think here is such an interesting place to start because this feels like his first like big meal ticket in a way, where Memento was like his big break. Insomnia was kind of like the ugly duckling of the group.
I've never seen Insomnia.
Where it was kind of like he was going like way out there trying something different. Didn't really work in the same way, but he gets another chance with a Prestige.
Yeah.
$40 million budget, solid cast of really really cool actors, and I mean at this point he had two superheroes in the main roles of his movie.
That's true. Yeah.
Batman and Wolverine. And this was during Wolverine time. Like the original X-Men movies were coming out at this point.
Yep.
And you could see a little bit of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine body in this movie.
He's got that build.
Early on, him and Piper in the bed, you just see his like 8-pack, and you're like, "Holy shit, this guy does magic!"
Yeah, you're like,
this guy is magic.
That's very
all
true.
I was thinking.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this movie had a budget of around like $40 million.
Was that not a lot in 2006?
It was a good amount. It was a good
yeah.
amount. I mean, it's a studio movie. I'm sure a good amount went to the cast, and as you can tell that Nolan really wanted to stay within the confines of that number. Like he did not want to go above and go against the studio's intent with this movie. I think he really was looking to kind of build a relationship with the studio
Also,
with this one.
Compared to Batman Begins, which came out the year before, that was $150 million budget.
Oh wow!
And that was the first movie in that series.
Yeah, that was the first.
Too.
So like, it's a kind of refreshing Prestige because of like what you're saying. Building those relationships and kind of this movie also, was such a passion project because of what he thought about the novel and kind of adapting the novel. So it's cool to see this because going after this, the budgets get
huge,
crazy.
Think of Oppenheimer.
Yeah, Oppenheimer.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that in the final week
Inception,
of our miniseries.
Dark Knight Rises. Interstellar, obviously, as we'll get to.
Yeah, I mean they all
huge budgets.
He becomes a very trusted director.
Yeah,
and I think this movie helps with that because just to cap off that point about the budget, it made $14.8 million, give or take, in its opening weekend, which isn't much. And certainly far away from the budget, but it was number one in the box office that week, October 20th, 2006. So by the end of its box office run, it ended up making over $109 million in the box office worldwide. So it ended up being a successful hit. Whether it was word of mouth or, it's predicated on a kind of like twist mystery, this movie. So I wouldn't be surprised if people, after they saw it, talked to others who hadn't seen it and were like, you got to see what happens with this movie. Like it takes so many twists and turns. Like there's a lot of things for people to take away from it to be like, you got to see what the heck's going on with this movie. At the very least, to talk about like the twist.
Definitely.
Or the multiple twists. I mean, it feels like there's a lot of twists, especially towards the end.
Third act, there's one probably every other scene.
I think that's the whole point of this. Is like not only are the two main characters tricking each other. I feel like the entire time we, the viewer, are supposed to be getting tricked.
For sure.
The entire. I mean, from the moment the movie starts, I feel like Michael Caine's voice is like manipulating me.
Yeah,
it's telling you exactly what the movie's going to do to you.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, I don't know if we want to get into that now, but there's a whole thing with that. I think in terms of rewatching the movie, where it relates to that exact thing of being manipulated by this film.
Yeah, we can get into that right now. I just want to say, just to put a cap on my last point, was that after this movie, this one made a good amount of money. Batman Begins made a good amount of money. So it felt like, for the studios, no matter what kind of angle he was going at, whether it was direct studio or something like this, which was a little more personal, Nolan can make money. It's possible for him, whether he's doing something for the studio or for himself, he can bring the money in. So it makes sense that not long after this, he stays with Warner Brothers, and they really use him for a long time, and they end up having a pretty long-standing relationship.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Sam. What was your thought about the structure?
I mean, I think this is kind of the crux of like why this movie is so highly rated, in my opinion, or why I think it's so great, is that this whole film is a magic trick.
Ooh.
Okay.
Spicy again.
Ow! Woo! That's hot.
Spicy marks for the table, please. But yeah, no. But this whole movie is a magic trick. And it's speaking on us as the audience. It's speaking on filmmaking, that we are, as an audience, want to be fooled. You know, we want to be swept off by our feet.
They literally say that in the movie, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this film also even more rewarding on rewatches, is if you're watching this with someone who has never seen it, or maybe just forgot the twist, forgot the movie, whatever, and you're watching it and you know everything that's happening, and you're seeing all these clues, and you're like, this is so obvious. This twist is so obvious. Like, to get into spoiler territory, Christian Bale's twin, you know, Borden's character, you know, is doing this disappearing act or transporting act where he, you know, catches the ball in another closet. You know, he lets the ball go, and then in a separate closet in another part of the stage opens, and then he catches the ball. And Hugh Jackman's character is extremely upset that he was able to do this amazing trick, and is, you know, obsessed with trying to replicate it or make it better.
Yep.
And, you know, when you figure out that the way it's being done is Borden has a twin named Fallon, and Fallon's the character that we see in the whole movie, and there are certain shots where it's completely obvious that that's Christian Bale. Like, you can tell. But watching it with someone for the first time, when I watched it for the first time, at least, and this is a testament, I guess, more also to, you know, if you can see it as a viewer. For me as a viewer, I did not expect it. And for people that I've watched it with that have never seen it, they didn't expect the twist either. And I think that's because the movie's a magic trick. When you learn what the trick is, when you learn what it is so obvious. So when you watch it, you're like, this is so obvious, but you're sitting next to someone who has no idea that it's coming. And that's brilliant, in my opinion.
Well, and that kind of leads into my literal one question that I came prepared with.
Intense.
Is I've been waiting for this
Only
moment.
one question in a Nolan movie?
Well, no. I mean, like, I guess the one question that I waited until the podcast to ask about
sure.
is it was not clear, and maybe they did say it in the movie and I just missed it, but was okay, so we've established that Fallon and Borden are both Christian Bale, same person. But is Fallon Borden's twin brother?
Yeah.
Or did he clone him?
No, they're just twins. Biological twins.
When did they say that in the movie? Because I totally missed that.
I think it's one of the... Isn't it at the very end, Hugh Jackman's like, so he was your brother? And then he goes like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
it's
that
like part of the
literally...
explanation.
But that literally makes me so mad because Michael Caine was right the entire time.
Yes. He
Because
says earlier in the film...
He's probably got a twin brother or something.
He says it multiple times, and then later on...
But that's...
Hugh Jackman's blind too.
Because he's obsessed.
Because he doesn't want to see it that way. He doesn't want to know the prestige like that. He wants... he gets so, like, incensed on trying to find the real truth. And that's what Michael Caine says, too, in the monologue at the beginning, is you think you know... Or you think you want to know, but you don't.
Well, that's what Sam was also kind of just saying, too. Like, we, the audience, want to be fooled. But, like, okay, so at the end, this was one of my weird things with the movie. Mm-hmm. At the very end, Hugh Jackman is laying there dying, and they're talking about, like, why they did it.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was a little anticlimactic when Hugh Jackman said it was the look on their faces. But is that me simplifying it? Like, is there more under that I missed? Because I found that to be kind of anticlimactic.
I mean...
It's an interesting take, and I think that whole scene in general is interesting because it kind of plays like a magician telling you how their act is done.
Yeah.
In a way where you're kind of like, the balloon gets deflated.
Yeah.
That whole scene is like deflating, like... poking a hole in the balloon and watching all the air fall out of it. Like, that's what the whole scene is. And in talking of what you were saying before, Sam, where the whole thing is like a magic trick, this is the part of the movie that Kane's talking about, where, you don't really want to know what happened, like how this happens, because if you do, you'll be disappointed, and it's not going to be the same for you.
So I was meant to feel that way.
I honestly think so, but it is not invalid for you to feel like it was anticlimactic, because I do think that scene, while it does make so much sense thematically, I do agree is a little bit of an issue with the movie, because it is kind of just like, here it is.
Yeah. Well, he really loads the gun and like loads all the bullets and then shoots them all in that last scene, in my opinion, like dramatically. And it's honestly
one of them literally right into huge jacked man.
Very true. When Borden shoots him, or Fallon, the one that doesn't get hanged at the end from
I think it's the nicer one.
I think it's the one that was in love with Rebecca Hall's character, Borden's first wife, and,
the actual
first woman, female love interest, and the one that really was, adored their kid.
Right, because he's so warm to the daughter when he sees her with Michael Caine.
Because when he's before the other Borden or Fallon, whatever, gets hanged, he says, "I'm sorry about Sarah," or he's like apologizing because the other one is the one that loved her. Yeah.
So then I think they were both, but I think it was the one who was not originally working with Hugh Jackman.
Well, they both
were.
Yeah.
Even from the start, even at the magic trick at the very beginning.
That's the whole thing about the movie, is that they're always switching.
Sorry, I just came up with a realization, but I don't want to get overzealous.
That's okay, go for it. We're kind of not in a category right now. So.
Is the reason that Borden doesn't remember what knot he tied because it wasn't
it wasn't him
that tied the knot. It was the other one. Every time.
It wasn't him.
And that's why Rebecca Hall says, "Some days you mean it, some days you don't."
Wow.
Yeah, there's so many. There's so many seeds planted in the film. It's crazy.
In fact,
it's so
this is going to be a point. I don't even know when I was going to bring this up, but at the very beginning of the movie, the first magic show that Borden puts on, there's that kid in the front, the nephew of Rebecca Hall's character, and he's getting all upset because the bird died.
Yeah.
Oh, he's like, "Where's his brother?"
Where's his brother?
Yeah.
They hinted from the very beginning.
Wow.
It's really and then obviously the thing with his fingers get shot off, and then they have to cut his fingers again, which they show you at the end.
Right.
That was in the little montage, like, why it's bleeding, like it was
cut
off for
like,
the
why
first
is it
time.
bleeding again?
Yeah.
So
they
things like that
directly put that in at the end.
Yeah.
But wow, but see, like that last scene was very, like Gabe said, it just kind of like poured out of their mouths, and you said they like loaded all their bullets and shot all of them on the last scene. But at the same time, I feel like there are so many hidden things throughout the movie where it's like, I can almost forgive them doing that at the end, because there is so much before that I feel like you would need to watch this movie like 6 times.
So my only response in the other direction for that is, could you imagine if they didn't say anything to each other, but you still saw the flashbacks, the circling, all this stuff?
That would be crazy. I mean, I think I know what you're saying, is that the Nolan dialogue in that scene may have been an issue.
Yeah, and this is something we'll come back to.
Definitely.
For sure we'll come back to with the rest of the series, is Nolan's dialogue is not always on the same level as Nolan's construction.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll get into this more in future episodes, because I don't think it's a massive issue here, but I do think that last scene is indicative of what's to come, which is kind of like, here it all is. We're going to show you too, but we're also going to show it. We're going to say it to you as much as we're going to show it to you. And I think you can just show it to the audience and it still works.
But I didn't find that for the entire rest of the movie.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Is I think the last scene is really the one that's indicative of that problem. I don't think the rest of the movie has that issue, because, like you're saying, each scene kind of has these little ingredients planted in it, but it's not it's not explicit about it.
But then could you say he did that on purpose? Like with what Sam was saying, like, is the magician revealing his secrets at the end?
Well, that's why I think that what I said at the beginning of this podcast is that Nolan's style is paired extremely well with this subject matter and the themes he's going for, which is this whole movie's a magic trick. So the end is blah. It's saying so much, which usually in Nolan movies, other instances, as Gabe mentioned, this is something that bothers me about his dialogue, and it takes me out of the movie when everything else about his movie is pulling me in, and then this is taking me out. So, but this was pulling me in because he unloaded it all in this last scene, and not only that, you're giving this dialogue to two of some of the best actors that live today. Mm-hmm. Hugh Jackman, he gets shot, and like his struggling to breathe and the way he's just trying to get each word out, like my heart, like I don't know, there's something like there's an extreme amount of dread, but there's also an amount of just like heaviness that I feel in that scene. And I think the dialogue, even if it is kind of exposition heavy, works. I think this dialogue, this script style, and this the style of Nolan in general works in this final scene because it's all unloaded.
Since we're so delicately on the topic of scenes, let's move on to our next segment here, guys. Favorite scene?
Yeah.
I'll get us started just so you have a second to think about it. But my favorite scene in the movie is definitely the one where Scarlett Johansson and Christian Bale sabotage Jackman's show of his door transporting man version, and Jackman falls, cracks his leg, and you see Bale going up on the other side, doing his little tricks, bringing down the fake Hugh Jackman, roped up, and is basically and promotes his own show. I think that's such a great scene, and Bale, who, like we've been saying, kind of acts in a different way for the rest of the movie. In this scene, you're like, oh man, this guy's amazing. Like just what you were saying about Hugh Jackman with the last scene, I feel that way about Bale in this scene, where it's like he's been on such a specific register for the rest of the movie, but here he taps into something totally different, and it seems so like effortless. He's so good in that scene. Do you guys have one you're ready to call out?
Yeah, I first want to mention about that scene is the character of Root that is involved in this scene.
Yeah.
I think was just like, Hugh Jackman's character Angier is looking to, do what Borden is doing, create kind of a clone of himself. Well, he doesn't know that yet, but, and he finds this double of himself,
Yeah, Scarlett Johansson brings him over to the bar and like, check this guy out.
And like something about, I don't know, I made him just be an idiot the first time I watched this. I straight up was like, that's not Hugh Jackman. I honestly thought they found like a double of Hugh Jackman, and I did not think that, because like it was weird, like his teeth were a little messed up, and like I think they gave
him a nose prosthetic.
Yeah, like a nose prosthetic.
He was just different enough.
Yeah, like where I was like, it honestly tricked me, which is another part of the movie that tricked me for some reason, but I don't even think it was like intentional. I think most people probably just think that's Hugh Jackman.
Well, I think that's
I did not think it was Hugh Jackman.
That's part of the thing about the movie too, is like this movie trains you to really try and analyze every moment, because you're trying to like get ahead of it, but the answer is so obviously in front of you, but you're trying to like dig so far in.
They want us to overanalyze.
For sure.
Just like somebody going to a magic show.
Exactly. You're trying to be like, where's the trap door?
Definitely. I mean, I think in terms of favorite scene, I mean, overall it probably is that final scene. But to choose another one, I think another segment of like just the segments of them sabotaging each other are just really fun. I know you just mentioned that one, but like the one of Angier, shooting his fingers off, and
earlier on in the movie,
it's just so like fun, because this movie is just so twisty. It just keeps throwing things at you, and I just feel like, I don't know, them just sabotaging each other is just such a like simple delight that I just took pleasure in. Like, it's like, oh, I'm gonna come to your show now, but it's like goofy because they're like in like these like beard,
these
or,
goofy disguises.
It's just funny.
I would say the last scene And I know we just had a whole thing about how it's like the magician revealing his secrets, but I think kind of like I'm more of an average viewer than the two of you of a movie. Like, you guys are looking at the movie and thinking about how the movie's made and like all these hidden details and stuff, and I'm like, whoa. Like, I'm one of those average viewers. So like, I think it was effective for me because I was a good target audience for what he was trying to do by making the whole movie a magic show. So I, the whole time, was doing what you just said and overanalyzing. And I so badly wanted to know, like, how these things were happening, why these things were happening. So, like, for me, that entire last montage while Borden is talking and while we're seeing, like, Fallon and how he did this and how he did that, like, that entire montage was so satisfying for me as a viewer. Because for, you know, how long is this movie? Like 2 hours something?
Yeah, it's like
Around
it's like
2 or
220, I think.
Yeah.
I think so.
So for pretty much 2 hours, I'm sitting there just wondering. And then I really enjoyed how they did that montage at the end for Borden's side of things. Because I feel like we are, during the movie, we are made more aware of Angier's tricks and how he made those things happen. His process, his prestige. But we're not really as clued in on Borden's. So I felt a lot of satisfaction at the end with that last scene, and also just, you know, for him to walk past all of those dead Hugh Jackmans in their tubs.
Ugh.
It's just like, it was so effective for me, that last scene. I know I hear what you're talking about with like the word vomit, but to me it's so minuscule against everything else happening in that scene, which is just so cool.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, there's a really impressive sense of dread in it, and I think you, Miss, you're talking about, I think the most intense part of that scene, for me at least, is being in a room surrounded by the sacrifice that Jackman's character has to make at the end, and everything that leads up to it, the way that Tesla talks about, and we should mention that the Tesla scenes are real, like, dark horse pick for this category.
I was
also
thinking of picking them just because I think that like Nolan's like the star power of Bowie when you first see him. Like, for me, I was like,
you feel the literal electricity.
And he kind of, I feel like he creates kind of an implication of the stakes, especially when he's like, the cost, you know? Like,
oh yeah,
very Russian cryptic.
Yeah.
Drop it to the bottom of the ocean, he said.
Yeah, it's really eerie the way that last scene is set up, and the way that the movie literally ends on one of the floating bodies.
Yeah.
Which isn't really a reveal if you remember how the machine works and the way they kind of lead up to it, but seeing one of the Jackmans.
Well, we're seeing the Prestige for the first time.
Jackman.
Well, are we seeing the? I forget what the Prestige means. Is it like just the end of the thing that the audience sees, or is it the way that the
Prestige is like is the end of the trick?
It's not like how the trick works.
No. Yeah.
So we're seeing
the way the sausage is made.
We're seeing the secret.
Yeah.
How it really happened.
Yeah.
The Prestige is the payoff.
Yeah, and it literally leaves like a pit in your stomach.
Yeah.
The same way, like, I mean, to a significantly more intense degree than, you know, if a magician told you how they made this pen disappear.
Yeah.
It's taken to a whole nother level, which I think is a smart escalation of the stakes for this movie too. Who's your guys' favorite performance in the movie? There's a lot of good ones.
There is.
There's a lot of like not as good ones, but there's a lot of good ones.
Gollum's cat.
Oh yeah.
The transporting
the
cat.
Black cat, yeah.
The transporting cat.
And all they used 3 stock noises for the cat. And they kept just going on.
But Gabe, see, while we were watching the movie, Gabe's like, oh, couldn't they have recorded another cat noise? I'm like, they're supposed to be the same cat. He's a clone. Of course
I
he
know,
makes
but
the
they
same
all,
sound.
but they only use like 3.
What a lazy
whatever.
director.
This is honestly just a direction issue.
Jesus.
Oh, it's a sound designer issue. What's that guy's
It's like,
name?
Chris, should we like include more cat? No, it's
No.
fine. It's fine. 3.
That sounds great.
3 is a magic number. It's my British accent.
Number.
Number. So I don't think that's like where he's from in England. I'm doing like the wrong regional accent.
I would, but for in all seriousness, I think my favorite performance would probably be Christian Bale, because I think like you said, Hugh Jackman is kind of just playing himself a little bit. I think Christian Bale in every movie he's in is given something so different, but like he's given 2 different things. Like you know, what's Bruce Wayne and Batman are 2 very different people.
True.
Fallon and Borden, 2 very different people.
Good
like
point.
I feel like
Absolutely.
that's something really cool that Christian Bale can do, and he always does it so effectively. So I really, I thought this was, similar in that sense of like playing double characters in a movie, but he does it so well in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think he's incredible, and he can be handed quite literally anything and make it work.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue. I do want to give credit to Jackman, though.
Yes.
I think I agree that Bale has the best performance in the movie, but I do think that Jackman goes to a different level in this movie for me, especially at that time when you think about the movies that he's in, which is like he is playing Wolverine. This is Wolverine,
Yeah.
or like he's playing the charming guy in Scoop, who might have a little something else going on, but not, it's a little different. In this movie, you do have Hugh Jackman playing himself as kind of like the Angier's character. He's putting on an accent, but it is very much like you were saying, his kind of bravado. And then you get Root, who is intentionally the opposite of the Hugh Jackman experience. And then you get
Lord Caldlow.
Caldlow at the end, which feels even more different than either of those 2 characters, in a way that I think is really cool and is a fun surprise, being so conditioned throughout the movie to expect to see the Jackman that we know and understand. He doesn't stick around very long as that character in this movie, but I think it's enough to where you're like, oh, I didn't think Jackman could do this. That's pretty cool. I don't know. What do you think?
No,
Sam?
I agree.
Where you're at?
I do think Bale probably has the best because of what like Missy is saying. Like, that dual performance is the centerpiece of the movie, and with rewatches, you can kind of try to pick up more of these differences and who is Borden at this point, who's Fallon at this point, how are their personalities between these 2 twins different from each other, but like you said, Hugh Jackman, he's doing a lot of different things in this movie, and also I just think the dark place his character Angier goes in this movie is something that like Hugh Jackman plays darkness, he's done it before and stuff, but like something about the dark obsession that just brings him down this rabbit hole was just something that like really captivated me. So definitely I would say Christian Bale, like objectively for me, but in terms of an actress I wanted to mention, not Scarlett Johansson. I think her performance is one of the weaker performances in the film.
I'm glad you brought this up. Because I was going to say this as well, and I think you're calling out exactly who I was going to call out as well.
Yeah, I think Rebecca Hall. I think one of my issues with this film is the female characters, which I think is something. This is very obvious.
You said the same thing, Gabe.
Yeah,
we're gonna come back to this.
Very obvious flaw in Nolan
we're
films.
gonna come back to this for sure.
Yeah, it's this is another thread you can go through each Nolan movie, but Rebecca Hall, I think with what she's given, I think she really sells the hell out of her performance, and really, I believed her kind of anguish with dealing with this, like, basically a bipolar husband in a way, he's, one day he loves her, one day he doesn't, and that leads her down a road of despair, leading to, her committing suicide, and it's a heavy role because of the fate of this character, and it's something that I think I think she's a very underrated actress in general. She's been very good in a lot of other films. One mainly coming top of my head is this film called The Gift, starring Jason Bateman. Very underrated movie. Also directed by Joel Edgerton as well. But yeah, Rebecca Hall, I really like her a lot as an actress, and I think she should have got some credit.
I agree. I think she doesn't get a lot to work with in this movie, but as opposed to Scarlett Johansson, who also doesn't get a lot to work with and doesn't really do much with it, Rebecca Hall actually does feel like she gives a lot of depth to that character. Yeah. And I agree. I think both of these primary female characters are pretty thankless in this movie, and kind of just serve the purpose of their male counters. But I think that either way, Rebecca Hall is able to really inject some solid humanity to that character in a way that I think is really is standout enough to mention, for sure. It's hard to mention Michael Caine. I feel like he's aside from like Andy Serkis and David Bowie, who are kind of more like bit moment parts, and they chew up the scenery. They're so good in their moments. But I think in terms of like consistent actors throughout the film, like the primary supporting cast, it's kind of hard to talk about Michael Caine.
I just feel like especially in the chain of Nolan movies, Michael Caine plays the same character in all of these movies. So I feel like Michael Caine is just like one of Christopher Nolan's themes. Like, he's just a Christopher Nolan. Like, we could say Time is a Christopher Nolan theme, and we can also say Michael Caine is a Christopher Nolan theme. Like, he is your token mentor. You know, listen and respect your elders, and you know, this guy's been doing this for a long time. You should probably listen to him. Like, he's your token grounding character.
Definitely.
And I think Michael Caine obviously does an amazing job at that, and that is why he's done it in many of these Nolan films. I don't know if Michael Caine himself was a mentor to Christopher Nolan at one point. Maybe that's why he used him. I'm not sure, but I do think he's incredible. But I think we shouldn't talk much about him because we're gonna literally talk about him 6 more times as we're doing the
Nolan movies.
Movies.
I think in a similar way to David Bowie, I think Michael Caine was somebody that Nolan obviously revered earlier in his life. You know, saw some of his earlier movies. I mean, Caine's been working for forever, so I'm sure growing up, Nolan had seen Michael Caine movies and was like, this guy, you know, this is my guy. Like, I love this guy. I love seeing this guy. I love following this guy's career, you know, all these things. This guy, I love this guy. And I agree. Anytime I see Michael Caine, I think the same thing. That's my guy. That's my guy right there. And I think Nolan felt the same way, and I think when he had the opportunity to put him in a role that makes sense for his movies, he was like, I'm just going to do this whenever I possibly can. And luckily, Michael Caine will do that. Yeah. And just like you said, Miss, he will do it well also. I'd only say the only other exception to that for like older Michael Caine is like Children of Men, probably. But that's probably it.
I think also he's in another Nolan movie that we'll be discussing that I don't think he fits in that box. I think he goes a little bit outside. It's not really it's very brief.
Sure.
But
we can definitely discuss that when we get to that.
Wait, but I want to know.
Well, we're talking about Tenet.
I'm gonna have to rewatch Tenet before we talk about it.
Well, I'd hope that we rewatch every movie before we talk about it on the podcast. So, all right, so that covers the performances basically. I want to go a little bit more because I actually think that this is a really important game to play with this movie in particular, and we've talked about it briefly here and there throughout the discussion so far. But this game is called Chameleon vs. Actor, which is a Missy original.
It was a you original.
Yeah, but you were like, we have to use this for something. And that's how we got to this podcast. We were like, this is solely made for the purpose of playing this game. And I think it's so appropriate for this movie.
Definitely.
Because not only do you have two guys that personify the chameleon and actually I would say chameleon versus movie star is more.
Well, yeah, you should describe the game first.
Yeah. So essentially, we go through the main cast of characters and we decide, are they a chameleonic actor, or are they a movie star actor? And the difference between those two things is the chameleonic actor is somebody who can really disappear into their role, become somebody totally different, unrecognizable in certain cases, and crush no matter what prosthetics they may have on, or what character they're playing. For a movie star, the point of their performance is to be themselves in that role. They're unmistakable, they are recognizable, but they are still in this movie. And you're there to watch this person in this movie. And I think it is clear what the kind of defining lines are with this movie.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that this is the first time we're doing chameleon versus movie star, because this feels like this whole movie's about this.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Sorry, she was
I was
shaking the
I was
mic,
getting excited and shaking my leg.
Hopefully it's not showing up on the recording.
I'm so sorry.
I guess we'll see.
Amateur move.
But
Sorry.
but hey, you know, if there's any time to do that now, it's gonna be the first attempt. Could you imagine? We're an hour 15 in. Could you imagine if we're like, let's listen to it a little bit, and we just hear like.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, why do you just kick the mic at this point?
Did I ruin the podcast?
Yeah,
I'm sure
it's ruined now.
I'm sure it's fine.
Why don't we just all kiss the mic and give a little kiss?
Welcome to our living room.
Yeah, this is what it's all about right here.
Living room.
So I think it's safe to say that we're all in agreement that Christian Bale. Well, that's an interesting one, but we'll get back to that in a second. Okay. I think that Christopher Nolan, Jesus.
We're losing it. Christian
You're
Bale.
really Jordan Elton.
Wait,
sorry.
Ricky J.
Chameleonic actor.
He's the chameleon.
For sure. Although actually, that's a funny thing, because I'm pretty sure Boogie Nights, he plays like a totally different kind of guy.
So maybe he is a chameleon.
Maybe he is. But Christian Bale feels like the quintessential, aside from like Daniel Day-Lewis, he feels like the quintessential chameleonic actor of today.
Oh, for sure.
I would say.
100%. I would, if you asked me, well, I would say he's maybe like the second quintessential chameleonic actor of today. The guy who was in like, what was that movie with the water creature guy?
Shape of Water?
Shape of Water, that guy. Who's that guy?
Are you talking about Doug Jones?
Oh,
Doug Jones is the chameleonic actor.
I feel like he's like a literal chameleon.
Yeah, Doug Jones has literally
makeup
never played himself in any way.
Okay, I guess
like
that's
he's
fair.
always under something.
Like he's,
which I do think is. I mean, I'm so glad you called him out.
He's a visually chameleon.
Yeah, like his performances, because of the characters that he plays, are very like, you have to be very different. Like his character in Hellboy has to be incredibly different to the character he plays in like Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah,
for example, it's like totally different kinds of performances for sure.
But if it's like, I guess I get where you're going. Where like Christian Bale, if he's playing himself, you obviously know who he is. So like Borden, as we perceive him as we're watching this movie, is Christian Bale, and that's very clear. But like Sam was saying, like, you know, when you're a first time viewer of this movie, I had no idea. And I only, we just rewatched it the other day, and I only remembered, like, towards the end of the movie that Fallon is actually Christian Bale. Mm-hmm. And there is a close-up of his face.
Yeah.
At the end, when he's talking to, when Fallon and Borden are speaking, like, across the jail cell bars, they do a close-up of Fallon's face. And for a second, I was like, wait, is that not Christian Bale? Mm. Like he's so good at making you think he is someone else. And I know we're not talking about other movies, but, you know, I think another good example of this is the latest Thor movie. No matter what people think of it, Christian Bale left no crumbs.
He's
in that
incredibly
movie.
good in that movie. Yeah.
I had
really
no idea that was Christian Bale until you told me.
It was, I mean, that was his, and I think he even has said this before, that was his version of trying to do Heath Heath
Heath
Ledger's
Ledger.
Joker in a movie. He was like, I finally have a chance to be a bad guy in a superhero movie. I'm doing this for him.
Yeah.
I'm doing this like he would, and I completely agree. I think he kicks ass in that movie. I think even if you look at something like American Hustle, or for God's sake, Vice,
Yes.
or The Fighter. He plays completely different people in every single one of those movies.
But
The Machinist, if you want to go back there.
He makes
American
huge...
Psycho.
Yeah, American Psycho. He makes huge sacrifices for his films, though. That's
of
another
course.
thing. Obviously, yes, he can act in a way that you just, have no idea who he is. He loses Christian Bale completely when he acts, which I guess is, kind of sad for him because we love Christian Bale, but also it shows how talented he is. But at the same time, he's willing to gain and lose 50 pounds. He's willing to shave his head. He's willing to grow out his hair. He's so dedicated, and it is so rewarding.
Yeah, there are few other actors in history that have that same kind of commitment to their roles. You could count it on one hand how many people have done the things that he's done to his body to achieve the roles that he has, and there's a reason why he is basically one of the poster childs of this category of actor.
In The Big Short.
Yeah, even in that,
he's really great in The Big Short. And that character has only one actual eyeball. And for the movie, he took out the other. I couldn't go through it.
I would literally believe you that Christian Bale took one of his eyeballs out for a movie.
Out.
Yeah, or use a contact or something to make the one stay in place, or look like it stays in place or something.
That's I don't know actually how they did it in Big Short, but
probably the same way they did with Paul Giamatti and The Holdovers.
There's a contact lens.
Exactly.
Oh, I was waiting for something more exciting.
I know, yeah.
The way you said
just
that.
what he said before.
Oh, well, for context in the recording, my brother and I just saw it yesterday.
Yeah, Paul
Holdovers.
Giamatti's
Holdovers.
Giamatti's character in the new family film.
Family friendly.
The Holdovers.
Yeah, Paul Giamatti definitely doesn't call somebody penis cancer in that movie or anything.
Yeah, no.
Family friendly.
Also,
So, chameleon versus movie star.
Okay, so on the other end of that spectrum, we have somebody who, as we've mentioned before in the pod, it feels like one of the most quintessential movie stars of now, which is Hugh Jackman, who, even playing a character like Angiers or like Wolverine or like The Greatest Showman, it's always Hugh Jackman. There's never a way of disguising that it's him. The movie tries to do it a little bit. The Prestige I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Tries to do it a little bit. And I think to a good effect. But, it's Hugh Jackman. That's what you're here for. That's what you're here to see. You're not expecting anything different from him. And that being said, I think that in that way, Michael Caine is also a movie star actor.
yes.
He was, in his time, one of the movie star actors, and I think to this day, even now, even though he's retired, old man Caine, in the same way, you know what you're going to get from this guy, but you're so excited to see him nonetheless. He is a movie star. You guys agree with that?
Yeah, Michael Caine is, when you see him, that's Michael Caine. That's a brilliant thing I have to say.
But that's what a movie star is. You really can't dissect it further. That's that person.
Yeah.
So that really is it. That's Michael Caine. That's Hugh Jackman. I would even say, I know it wasn't the case in 2006, but that's Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, it was. I guess it was a little bit for people who kind of follow movies a little more closely. By this point, Ghost World had obviously come out. Lost in Translation was out by that point. She was becoming established, but obviously, as I mentioned, she starts to hit the ground running after this, more or less, especially for a wide audience. So now we're gonna move on to the next game, which is a fun little experiment. If we had to cast this movie today, who would we pick? We'll stick to just the main actors for now, because Missy's very stressed out about this about this game. So Sam, do you want to get us started with what your picks would be for this? For this one.
So I believe that my first choice would be for Hugh Jackman's character.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked Henry Cavill.
This was my choice also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of just came to me like in a dream. I was just thinking about it, and Henry Cavill is.
I dream about Henry Cavill pretty frequently.
Yeah,
also.
well, I was dreaming of the Argyle trailer, but
of course, because we've seen it so many times, it practically plays back in our dreams too. Yeah.
But yeah, Henry Cavill, obviously famously Superman, and then he was Geralt of the Netflix Witcher show.
Don't remind me, dude.
But he's a guy with a great physique, but he also has serious dramatic acting chops that I think people don't give him enough credit for, or, unless you're really a fan, in my opinion.
And similarly to Jackman, too, he's a real movie star.
Yeah.
Like, he brings the same kind of energy that Jackman does in this movie. And even in certain places, I think Jackman in this movie kind of is styled a little bit like Henry Cavill's also, with the clean shavenness and the kind of straight brown hair, dark hair.
Yeah, I can see Cavill in that fashion, like you're saying.
Yeah, I think he could fall into it pretty smooth. Yeah.
And I think Henry Cavill has gone a little darker before with certain role. I mean, Mission Impossible wasn't crazy dark, but he was playing kind of a villainous role in that, in Mission Impossible 6 Fallout. So I think he could go down that darker obsession path that Hugh Jackman pulls off in The Prestige. So I think that would be my choice.
Yeah, I would love to see him in a role like this.
I really would as well.
Where he really gets to chew up a really interesting character.
Yeah.
With that many layers. I think he would crush this.
And with this director.
Yeah. Yeah, working with a good director like that, for sure.
And now I'll discuss. So I'll discuss who I thought should replace Christian Bale's character.
I don't like this.
I can't. So I pick young Sheldon.
Like the actor that plays young Sheldon?
Yeah, no, that's not my legitimate choice. So I was just full of go.
Wow,
no, so
what a call out.
My actual choice would be. I just had him pulled up here. Oh, Jacob Elordi.
Ah, okay.
So Jacob Elordi, he's for any listeners that don't know who he is, he's gotten bigger because of the HBO show Euphoria, starring Zendaya. And recently though, he's been doing some interesting films with director Emerald Fennell and the new movie Saltburn.
Is that how you pronounce her last name?
That's how I pronounce it.
I thought it was Fennell.
Is there an R in there?
I thought it was just Fennell.
We're gonna have to fact check this.
It's Fennell.
Pause the pod.
Oh,
it is Fennell?
Sam was right.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So
Fuck me, I guess.
Emerald Fennell was Saltburn, also starring Barry Keoghan. And then in Priscilla, which is the new Sofia Coppola movie about Elvis, where Jacob Elordi plays Elvis. So he's dipping his toes into different things right now, and I think he can really keep going and get bigger. And I'm very excited because he's very, very good in the show Euphoria. He's very good in Priscilla. So I think he would, I think this would be a challenging role for him. But I think he's just as good looking as Christian Bale. And I think he can go down that serious path and play this kind of obsessive character about technique and about, being the best. And yeah, so that's my choice.
That's interesting. I can see it. I don't know if his work so far has screamed chameleon to me quite yet, but I do think he'd be an interesting choice to kind of show that he can do it.
Yeah,
in a way.
I think he's a rookie quarterback, and I'm predicting a couple years down the line, he could be MVP.
Get a ring.
Get a ring.
Or is that they get
ring?
rings?
Yeah.
Did they get rings in the NFL and NBA?
I think so.
They
should.
We're gonna sound like fucking idiots.
They should.
Miss, do you have your picks?
I think so.
Okay.
And I really just this is.
For the listeners, Missy has clammed up so tightly. All the way in the corner of the couch. Her entire demeanor has changed.
I'm really confident about one of my answers.
Okay, go ahead.
And then I have just a weird, this was the first person that came into my head and I don't know why answer.
That's the perfect answer.
So my first one, and I feel like it's not necessarily like, if we were casting it today, I feel like this person is the same age as Hugh Jackman, but I think another person who would kill this role of Hugh Jackman's role is Robert Downey. He's also got that kind of like showmanship, kind of wit. I also, I think about his character in Sherlock Holmes, which to me has a lot of similarities to Angier. So for some reason, he was the first one that came to mind for Angier. Then I don't know why, and I have literally no idea why I thought this would work, but I was thinking of actors who, I don't know why, but I was thinking of just British actors. I don't even know if this actor is British. I know he has an accent that is European of some sort. Okay. But I kept thinking of Daniel Kaluuya.
Daniel Kaluuya is very British.
Okay, so he's very British.
Very British.
And
yes.
I don't know why, but like, to me, the character of Borden has almost like a haunting element of his character.
I'm gonna get into this in my
and too. Yeah, and I think that Daniel Kaluuya, am I saying Kaluuya?
Kaluuya, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes in his performances, I get that same kind of like, there's something a little haunting about it.
Something going on under the skin.
Yeah, like he's very good at.
That's a great call.
Giving you kind of like a spooky layer to his acting. So I don't know why. I mean, I don't know if he's done any chameleonic performances, but I think again, like Jacob Elordi for Sam, it could be a cool opportunity for him to showcase that. Yeah,
he does a lot of different kinds of roles. But it is always him, at least so far. So I do think that he's treading more in movie star territory, but he's got all the talent in the world to pull out something like this for sure. I think that's a great call.
I think it's an amazing choice.
Thanks,
and if RDJ was a little bit younger, I would say that he would be really great for Angers also. Yeah, but he's like 15, 20 years a little bit too old. I would say. At this point, but like Sherlock Holmes time, I think that's perfect. For my picks, I think it would be fun to get Oscar Isaac in the Angiers role. Because he's a real, like, obviously of the stage, very showman-y, very kind of out there personality, like you can detect him a mile away and you love to see him kind of thing, and to see his kind of descent the way that Angiers does in this movie I think would be really cool to watch. And on a different end of the spectrum, similar to what you were talking about with Kaluuya, where there's always kind of some sinister going on, or at least kind of unusual and uneasy about the character, I think Bill Skarsgård is a very chameleonic actor that could really do something cool with this role.
That's wow.
Because when you think about like him regularly, even in something like Barbarian, you think about this guy like he's a little tall, a little bit imposing, like there's something else going on down there. And the same way that Borden in this movie is hiding his secrets the entire time, that's the kind of thing that gets evoked when you see Bill Skarsgård in a movie. You're like, what's really going on with this guy? Like you're always kind of suspect of him no matter what. Even in John Wick Chapter 4, where everyone is kind of a fun caricature of a character, he still is able to, in his antagonist character, still is able to bring in that kind of depth. And I think with this role, I think he could really chew it up too, in that same way.
I agree to a point. I think he can do that, because I think he already has proven like a chameleon style in ways. And I think, like you said, in Barbarian is kind of a role where like he's not Pennywise. He's not like some crazy elaborate thing.
Yeah, he purposefully plays on the fact that he's not. In that movie.
Exactly. Yeah, which makes that
which makes it so good.
But I think there's like a tragedy element for me with Borden's character that I think Christian Bale pulls off. Where I do kind of feel bad for what's going on with Christian Bale at points, and I don't know if Bill Skarsgård would be able to get that emotion out of me in terms of feeling that tragedy of kind of like this character's dark path and kind of the way his life, or the life of him and his twin brother, end up.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think a lot of this exercise is like, I would love to see this guy do this to show that he can do it.
Yeah.
And I think we've been bringing this up in each of our picks in different ways. And I think for Skarsgård, I feel very strongly that he can do something like that, where he can bring out a kind of sympathy for that version of his character, and also have that other twin brother element to it. Yeah, no, I think all these ideas are pretty cool.
Just while you were talking, it made me think of another one for Angier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would do this instead of RDJ.
Yeah.
Benedict Cumberbatch.
Oh, that's a great one.
For Angier?
Yeah.
That is really good.
That's a great one.
I feel like he would also leave no crumbs as Angier.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And he's obviously got the
screen presence.
The presence, the talent. Yeah.
And also the kind of like another Sherlock. I feel like, so I guess there's got to be some ties between these characters. He's also got that kind of sinister, weird thing to him that he can
like there's
do.
something going on with him too. Yeah, for sure. Like these characters aren't exactly like squeaky clean in any way. So on either side.
Based on that, I'm coming up with another one. See, now I'm full of answers.
Oh boy, here we go.
So I'm coming up with I'm coming up with another one for Borden. I think my dream cast would be Benedict Cumberbatch as Angier, and then Ben Mendelsohn as Borden.
Oh, I do like Mendelsohn. Again, too old.
I think.
No, he's not.
He's like the same age as RDJ, no?
He is?
So can you fact check this for me? He's a little bit older. But going back to your other one though, I think that's so great to have Cumberbatch versus Kaluuya.
That would be really
cool
great.
Face-off.
Yeah.
I think that would be the ideal of your
how
combination.
Cool would that be?
That would be cool.
Ben Mendelsohn's 54 and Robert Downey Jr. is 59.
So he's a baby. I love Ben. So my dream cast would be Ben Mendelsohn and Benedict. But I guess for the purposes of being age similar to the movie.
Well, I think it's important to the story.
Yeah.
To make them younger.
That's true.
Yeah, because they need to be like the whole. I feel like them being younger is a necessary element of their characters.
It's a part of their hunger.
Yeah, exactly. If they're older, they're like going to be more seasoned.
Right, they've been around a while. I'm sure they've had their ups and downs in the career. Yeah, it's a very different kind of movie if you have someone older.
Younger Ben Mendelsohn though, it's perfect.
He would kill it.
Slice.
Yes.
So I think we ate up that game. I would say.
Yes.
I would say so.
Young Sheldon as well, I think, would be a great choice for Borden because there's one part of Young Sheldon that's, all about perfection.
You're really going for this, huh?
But the other part of Young Sheldon has a heart of gold.
I was actually thinking Young Sheldon as, like, Borden's daughter.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Oh, gender bent. Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine like the cameo,
film.
like the audience would be sort of clapping like a Marvel movie. They'd be like, "Yeah, Young Sheldon."
A gender bent version of this movie would be interesting. Like if it was two females magicians trying to like figure out.
That'd be a cool flip on it.
Maybe it'll be
if they ever remake it.
Yeah, because I think it would give a lot more like agency to their goal of like being a big deal.
Yeah.
Like it still makes sense with the male centric version, but I do think there's an interesting element of like these two female magicians who's kind of like who are kind of oddities in their profession, but are still trying to like make it work.
I already know the cast.
What were we thinking?
Olivia Colman and Rosamund Pike.
They're older though.
So,
I would do.
I love both of them.
I could put Rosamund in there. I don't know about Olivia.
What do you think of? I love Mulligan. Do you think Carey Mulligan would be a good?
Yeah, do Carey and Rosamund. I think that would be.
That's a good one. Combo. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
Honestly, you could even get probably ScarJo now in it because she's barely aged.
No.
I don't know. I don't see her in these.
Okay, how about ScarJo in the Kane role?
No. Anyway, next topic.
Oh, come on, entertain me.
Well, the one good thing is if there's a female led is that in this situation the men would be the plot devices instead of the women.
See, that's the good shit right there. That's what this podcast is all about. Also, what this podcast is all about is education, because no family movie night is complete without having a little bit of a lesson learned.
That's true.
So that's the question. What is the life lessons to take away from The Prestige? My first one, most obvious one is be careful. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Sometimes the answers that you're looking for are not the ones that you want.
Yeah, I think another one is if you have a twin, just let them do their own thing. Why you like one of these twins? I mean, they probably both agreed to do this trick together, this lifelong magic trick. But I feel like I don't know.
The other one, the one that loved, I think Sarah. The
I
wife,
feel like
he's kind of a pushover a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I feel like he was more dedicated to a family life, and I feel like, and the other twin was more we need to keep doing magic and keep doing these tricks and things like that. So I feel like you got a twin. Maybe he's enjoying his life as the family. Why are you bringing him into this?
Your voice went up 7 octaves.
Yeah,
you did?
You should see the bars on the recording. It's
well, yeah. So this, but
I think that's a good takeaway.
That's a good life lesson.
As a twin, I cannot imagine roping our sister into.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, imagine you and Emma
trying to do a twin act.
Yeah, you have to give her the beard, and then you take the beard, and it's
All right, so you sit in the cupboard for the next 6 hours while I go,
and
have
then one of
dinner
you has
with
to
my
get
family.
buried alive.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. That's unfortunate.
Which is another scene that I think was just a side thing. It was just brutal. Was where Fallon gets buried alive, and they're committing that hard. That one of them gets.
That was all intense.
And he's like, "Go dig." They start digging. I'm like, Jesus.
Walks away with a limp. Heavy duty Jackman shit. Do you have any life lessons that you would take away from this movie, Miss?
I would probably just say, and I think Sam kind of. No, you kind of hinted. Sam didn't hint mine.
I was about to say, where can you go from there?
I think that sometimes simple is okay, and you don't have to overcomplicate it. I think, Hugh Jackman's downfall was, like we were saying earlier in the pod, if he had just accepted Michael Caine saying, I know how he did it, it was a double. And he said it 3 different times, and Hugh Jackman it just wasn't enough. Sometimes the simple answer is okay. Sometimes you don't have to overcomplicate it. Sometimes you can go, okay, that makes sense. And I think that was a really major thing for this film. I think it's a career issue for magicians that, they're gonna overcomplicate and overanalyze. That's their whole thing. But I think just if we, the regular viewer, are taking anything away, it's don't obsess. Just take it for what it is, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Sam. I was just gonna say that we took this. We took this segment a lot more seriously than I originally.
Well, I didn't take it seriously.
I guess more so Missy and I.
I was gonna say that also. If you meet Nikola Tesla and he tells you not to use this machine that he made, I would just not use the machine that he made.
That's a great one. Yeah. That's a great one. I would say magic is your field, Hugh Jackman. I get you. Nikola Tesla probably knows what he's talking about when he's talking about his science.
I also think that, and I mentioned this to Gabe while we were watching the movie, that the box that the machine is in, that Tesla built, the big brown triangular box, that why would anyone open that box? That box looks like it has bad intentions.
It looks like the entrance into hell.
It does, and I said it looks like if anyone's seen the movie Midsummer, it looks like the building that they burn people alive in at the end of Midsummer.
Mutilate them and
it's like
drug them.
The big brown triangle, I feel like, is just we're not supposed to want to touch the big brown triangle. So the biggest life lessons that I took from this is, don't approach the big brown triangle.
Yeah, don't open it.
Don't open the big brown triangle.
You're not going to like what's in there. You don't. Yeah. I would also, in that same kind of vein, I would also add that if you are approached with a machine that clones yourself, maybe just, kill the one clone and just, let it lie, I feel like it's a lot of work to, die over and over again and then have an entire basement full of your dead bodies floating. Seems a little inconvenient, you know.
Yeah.
Seems like a lot of work.
It's a lot. It's a lot of sadness there.
It's a lot of huge jacked men.
Yeah. Oh, I like that one.
Yeah. Too bad I can't bring that into any more Nolan pods.
Yeah, there's no more Hugh
This
Jackman.
is it for Jackman. And
It's okay. I'm sure
Nolan.
we'll, in future podcast series, somehow huge jacked man will pop up again.
What? I don't even know if he would. Like, what other...
Unless we did something involving
Like-
X-Men, honestly.
Like, Baz Luhrmann's Australia?
Or like a Deadpool review.
Van Helsing.
Oof. Not gonna touch that one.
Well,
No.
we said I'm gonna have a Broadway branch
Oh,
of
that's true.
LilliHouse.
When we get into
and-
that, yeah.
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 Or like, who directed Les Mis? Who's
That was Tom something, right?
Oh, was it Thomas Marshall or whatever?
It was Tom Hooper. That's what I was thinking.
Tom
of.
Hooper.
Yeah, Tom Hooper, director of The Danish Girl, Cats, and The King's Speech.
Okay, so
That's a lot of different movies.
so if we
Right.
ever wanted to do one where like we didn't like watching the movies,
Yeah, we could do a Tom Hooper-a-thon, you know?
that sounds like 4 years in. If we have just ran out of fun
Just
people
random
to talk about.
ideas. We're like, all right, we've done Scorsese, Spielberg,
Like,
who's left? Like,
Crossing names off the list at the very bottom is
yeah,
Tom Hooper's
Tom
name, or like
Hooper.
everyone's like dun dun dun.
It's like, all right, let's put Cats on and get this shit over
Oh
with.
Jesus!
Our only two listeners are our two moms.
And Riku, yeah.
Aww.
That's our cat, by the way. All right, so winding down here a little bit, we got the last few kind of goofy little names. Sam keeps showing me pictures of the kid from Young Sheldon. What is that? Oh, he's scary
dumb
looking. He although he's had a major growth spurt recently,
Yeah,
he
he's
looks
very
like a
old.
regular human being now,
Yeah,
which
he's like a
is
teenager.
bizarre. But anyway, Young Sheldon aside, the next segment, since we mentioned early on we have a child here, we're always talking about when we're going to be introducing certain movies to our son and our future children. So the question is, how old should our child be before they watch The Prestige? My take is at least 13. Like, not even just because of the content, the content obviously, but also this is a confusing as shit movie.
Yeah.
Like, purposefully confusing. And I don't think that it will. I honestly don't think it'd be that much fun to watch before like 13 years old.
I agree.
I would go way older. I would say
Older.
like 20.
20?
I feel like my brain, I mean, like, how old am I now? I'm 28 years old now, and I feel like I've seen this movie 3 times, and this last viewing was the only time where I was like, oh. Like I, we watched it together in college. Like, I feel like your mind needs to be clear of a lot of nonsense to watch a movie like this. But I feel like that's a Christopher Nolan thing in general, too.
Absolutely.
Like, I can't watch a Christopher Nolan movie if I am feeling overwhelmed or overstimulated by a lot of other things.
Yeah.
By anything
That's a
else
good
in
point.
life.
So I feel like I need to be... So maybe age isn't as much a thing for me. It's more just like, am I, like, mentally equipped to
State of
handle
mind.
this? Yeah.
Well, that's why I think late middle school, early high school
Okay,
time
but
is the best earliest time.
But you're also talking about our son. And boys don't, like, develop their brain cells until, like, 30.
Well, let's talk about me
So-
as a boy.
let's use Sam as a
Me-
example.
Okay, so
me
22
as the
years
proxy
old.
boy.
Let's put him in the tank and see what happens.
Yeah, like I was in the tank and when I think I watched this, I would say, as I agree with Gabe, I think 13. I think I was around 13 when I first watched this film. At a time where I was like really getting into movies. I was like it was my brain felt like it was developing more because I was like watching all these different films, and it was making me think more about films than I had before that. And I think Gabe's about to say is that's a time in your life, like, what are you doing? Like, you're farting in middle school, farting around in middle school,
And then you go home at 3:30, and then
yeah, and then you do
you
homework
have dinner and you do homework.
That's it. Like, what do you?
Other
you know,
than that,
like I feel like there's not a lot going on. Obviously, I can't speak to every 13-year-old. Obviously, some 13-year-olds are probably going through more stressful situations in their
like
lives.
In sports.
Or maybe they're doing sports,
right?
doing
Extracurriculars, sure.
But still, I think a lot of kids can watch this movie at 13. I think it's a good age, and even if they don't fully grasp everything they're watching, they will eventually. More times they watch it.
Yeah, and I think it's a good age too because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at that age, the questions won't be like straight up. I don't get any of this. It could be, and I understand if it is, especially for this movie. But I think the questions will be able to be a little more specific, I would say. And again, we're talking about bare minimum age here. This if they don't see it at 13, it will only be better the older he gets after that.
Yeah.
For example. So I think that's a good place to put it.
That's fair. I mean, I think it's appropriate for him at 13. Like, I don't think there's like things in this movie. I mean, there is suicide in the film, which is difficult. But I think at 13, you know about suicide. You're aware of suicide,
especially nowadays, where the social media landscape kind of puts a whole bunch of new things in your face that may or may not be nice.
Yeah, like I think it would be cool for Charlie, our son, to watch this at 13. And then to watch it again at 18, and then to watch it again at like 25.
Yeah,
and I think he would.
It's a good one to grow on.
Yeah, he would pull really cool things from it at those different ages.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So I think that dovetails very nicely into our last segment, which is talking about the Oscars, which is always kind of a fun litmus test for that time period when the movie came out. So as I said, this one came out October 20th, 2006. So it'll be the 2007 Oscars. This movie was nominated for only two things: art direction and cinematography, which I think are two certainly good nominations for this movie to have. Our cat's about to start going off. He's got a lot of takes about the Oscars, but that being said, I do think that this movie could have had more, especially if we get into what the Oscars looked like in 2007. So, just to take a look back, this was the 79th Oscars. Let's take a look at, oh Jesus, this is an interesting.
Yeah.
So, let me just make sure this is correct. Yeah, so this is a really bad Oscar year.
Yeah, 2006 was a weak year on my
for context, this is the 2007 Oscars. Departed wins Best Picture, which I think is a great choice and obviously well deserved for Scorsese. But other than that, you get The Queen, Little Miss Sunshine, Letters from Iwo Jima, and Babel. Are you familiar with any of those films?
No. just The Departed.
Just The Departed. So that's kind of an indication of like why they were scraping this part of the barrel.
Yeah. I've heard of Letters from Iwo Jima.
Yeah, that's the closest thing I think to one that has kind of lasted. Some of the screenplay nominations are a little bit better. Pan's Labyrinth gets in there for original screenplay. Children of Men and adapted, which I think is is criminal that it just ended up in adapted. But this movie ends up in cinematography alongside The Black Dahlia, Children of Men, Pan's Labyrinth, which won, and The Illusionist, with which is funny to imagine that both of these magic movies show up in there. Yeah. Cinematography, and then art direction, Pan's Labyrinth again, Dreamgirls, The Good Shepherd, and Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, which is the second one.
That's the second one.
Yeah, Curse of the Black Pearl.
That is the first one. Yes.
I do think the second one is better, so I'm glad it was nominated. But
that's a hot take.
We can get into that in our. Who directed that movie?
Gore Verbinski.
Was that him?
Did we ever go through Gore Verbinski's?
Yeah.
filmography.
Maybe one day. You
I'll
never
be next
know.
to Tom Hooper's.
After Tom Hooper. Yeah, that's right. That sounds right. So that being said, if we were doing a fake Oscars, and we're gonna limit it to just one because we could probably just go off for however long about this, and we're nearing the 2-hour mark here. What other Oscar would we give this movie? At least nomination-wise. Doesn't have to be a win, but just to get it in the conversation.
I would say, and like, so originally I was like screenplay, but it wasn't. What's so cool about this movie is the concept, right? And that wasn't original to the film.
But it was adapted.
It was adapted, but, you know, so I guess maybe adapted, but I think my heart goes to Best Actor for Christian Bale.
Yeah, that's a fair take. The Best Actor lineup for this year was Leonardo DiCaprio in Blood Diamond, Ryan Gosling in Half Nelson, Peter O'Toole in Venus, and Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happiness.
It's really kind of a weak...
Terrible.
It's really... overall, Oscars is really weak year.
This is awful. Forrest Whitaker in The Last King of Scotland is, you know, from what I've heard, a good performance. I'm glad Forrest Whitaker got recognition for a role because he's amazing in general. But Jesus, man, you could easily get either of these guys in that conversation. You know, I don't know. I think that's a good choice. I think that's a good choice. For me, I think I would actually choose adapted screenplay because in terms of converting it from what the book presents to the story that's shown in the movie, I think it's really, really a solid adaptation. And in terms of the things nominated, you know, get it in there instead of Notes on a Scandal, and I think nobody would care. You know, if you put in The Prestige instead of Notes of a Scandal, here's the lineup: Departed, Borat, which I know Missy you would have your qualms with, but I think is pretty great. Children of Men, incredible. Little Children, which is the guy who did Tar, Todd Field, and then The Prestige, which I think is a pretty sick lineup in a year of not very sick lineups.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus, Best Animated Feature only has 3 movies in it.
Happy Feet.
Happy Feet, Cars, and Monster House.
Happy Feet and Monster House were great films.
Monster House.
This is the most... That's cursed.
That's honestly sad.
That's honestly cursed.
It's very sad.
Holy shit.
There must have been some...
That's unbelievable. This is the more I look at this lineup of Oscars, the worse I feel like this Oscars was.
Yeah.
I don't know, Sam. What's your choice here? What do you think?
I would also agree with best adapted screenplay. Honestly, just because, like you had mentioned, this book was complicated, and Nolan had to extract, you know, kind of the best, most interesting elements of the book and make it into a movie that's, you know, attractive to general audiences. And that's something that, you know, I think Nolan does later in his movies, you know, recently.
For example?
With adaptation.
For sure.
So I think it's, you know, it's also one of his better screenplays overall in his filmography. So
I agree.
I agree.
I would nominate.
I agree for sure.
And like you had mentioned, you could replace one of these films.
Many of these are very, very replaceable.
Yeah,
I would say. Yeah. All right, so that wraps up the first of 4 podcast conversations covering some of the most important films of Christopher Nolan's career. Like we mentioned, there's a lot to cover with this career, and thankfully he's still hitting major peaks even at this point in his career. And, you know, just as, you know, we're not going to keep it a secret, the sequence of movies that we're going to be talking about here, we're going in chronological order from the ones that we've chosen. We're starting with The Prestige. Next we'll be going into Interstellar, and then Tenet, and lastly capping it off with what I believe is his real opus achievement is Oppenheimer. and we can discuss and and converse about that exclamation. From
I already have notes on what you just said.
Well, then, thank goodness we have a podcast to air all that dirty laundry on. But nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope you enjoyed what you've heard so far. I hope you.
Our cat
is
is
chiming in, saying that he appreciates you guys listening and for making it this far in the conversation. I hope you enjoyed.
I hope young Sheldon is listening.
I hope so too. How cool would it be for young Sheldon to give us
I'd be very happy for young Sheldon to listen to this, and my message to him is you can do whatever you need to do to survive.
Yeah, don't worry about roping your twin brother along.
Yeah.
You can do it on your own, and I think you're doing a great job already. So don't feel like you have to string Fallon Sheldon around, or whatever his name is. Like, you can do it. I believe
this
in you.
is unhinged.
We're getting a little delirious here, but for the three of us, thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next pod.